The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Hey, if it's 9 at night, it's Citizen Mike. Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Burdinsky. This is the episode for October 19, 2017. On my right, the editor of the Record Journal, Ralph Tomaselli. Ralph, we're continuing on with our final episode, in our series of chatting with non-incumbent Board of Ed members. And on this episode, our first Board of Ed member is Ray Ross, and following him is going to be, Ray is a Republican, and following him is going to be Tammy Raccio, the Democrat. But before we get him on camera, let's go over the ground rules, you and I. Refresh my memory, refresh your memory, and for our viewers' benefit. The format of this chat is that we're going to try to first give each candidate about 10 minutes.
Right.
They have been sent the questions in advance. Yes, they have. They've had the questions for a long time, or the topics, which gives them a chance to rehearse, prepare, roundtable, research, to give it some thought. And we did that because we wanted them with their most thoughtful. We didn't want a pop quiz.
Right.
We didn't want to reward glibness or memory of minutia, that comes back. We wanted some thoughtful answers, and so that's why we did what we did.
Right.
Seems to be working out. We've had invitations go out to all 7 of the non-incumbent Board of Ed members, and these are the final 2. This is number 6 and number 7. Everyone has responded, and after tonight, all the non-incumbent Board of Ed people will be on the show.
Right.
Have we got it? Do you think we missed anything?
No, well, just that we, well, you did send them the questions in advance.
Yeah.
We may ask some follow-up questions, and those are not in advance.
Good point. Yeah, that's true. Who knows where the conversation goes?
Right.
All right. So let's get Ray Ross on camera. Ray is a Republican running for the Board of Ed. He was kind enough to send me a little biographical information about himself. He says in his email to me that he is a 5th-generation Wallingford resident and one of 5 generations that have been educated in the Wallingford school system. He was a Scoutmaster. He was executive director of the Great Connecticut Jazz and Blues Festival. He was a member of the Public Celebrations Committee. He's a member of the Veterans Memorial Parade Committee, vice president of the Wallingford Historic Preservation Trust. He is a director of the Center Street Cemetery Association, and he's over the years volunteered in a lot of ways for a lot of different organizations, and now he is running for the Board of Ed. Thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
All right, let's get down to business. The first question we're presenting to Ray and to Tammy Raccio simultaneously. Tammy is in the audience. She's sitting by
Sitting in the studio.
Here in the studio.
She is the audience.
She is the audience, and so she's listening as I read this. And it involves an article that appeared in the Atlantic magazine. It's entitled "Don't Help Your Kids with Their Homework and Other Insights from a Groundbreaking Study of How Parents Impact Children's Academic Achievement." I'm going to take some bits and pieces of this, not the whole article, but it starts out this way, Ray. One of the central tenets of raising kids in America is that parents should be actively involved in their children's education, meeting with teachers, volunteering at school, helping with homework, and doing 100 other things that few working parents have time for. These obligations are so baked into American values that few parents stop to ask whether they are worth the effort. In the largest ever study of how parental involvement affects academic achievement, these two sociology professors from respected universities, one is the University of Texas and the other is Duke, found that it doesn't affect academic achievement. Parental involvement doesn't. The researchers combed through nearly 3 decades worth of longitudinal surveys of American parents and tracked 63 different measures of parental participation in kids' academic lives. What they found surprised them. Most measurable forms of parental involvement seem to yield few academic dividends for kids. One of the reasons parental involvement in schools has become dogma the federal government has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on programs that seek to engage parents. I'm done reading. The article goes on. The entire article was sent, of course, to the candidates. Let's start the clock for Ray. Ray,
Okay.
what'd you think of that article?
I read the article, and some parts I agree with, but the major portion I have to qualify. I feel that parental involvement is a good thing. I think it's a partnership it should be a good partnership between the teachers in the school and the parents at the home, and it has to be a balance. I think right from kindergarten, I know my daughter read to my granddaughter when she was 2, and she made it a point to read to her. By the time she was in kindergarten, she was prepared. And my daughter was a room mom all the way through what we call grammar school, and right up into junior high. As far as helping with homework, I think if there's a need, absolutely the parents should be involved in homework. This is not a blanket thing, do not help with the homework, because some kids get stuck on something, they need help. They don't need it done for them, and that's a mistake if it happens. But let's say they have a science project making a volcano. Well, maybe they shouldn't be using sharp instruments. The parent will help them there, but it's got to be theirs 100%. But then you get into middle school, and it gets a little bit more difficult and a little gray, I think. Parental help is necessary for some kids, not for others. But to be an overbearing parent is the worst thing that you can do to your son or daughter in the school system. As it gets into high school, a lot of the students don't want parental help at that point. And in some subjects, like with math, there's not too many parents out there that can help their kids, their students with math. But
Ralph could, I think.
But I think, and I see it a lot because I'm at a couple of the schools a lot, and some of the parents, every time you turn around, they're almost wiping the kid's nose when he sniffles, and they're badgering the teachers. But the majority of parents try to find a balance, A, because they work, and B, because they're concerned about their education. So I think that there's a balance to be had there.
After reading this article, Ray, would it influence you as a Board of Education member? For example, if the school system wanted to spend a lot of money or spend money on programs to encourage parents being involved, is that still something you would be supportive of?
Well, I don't see why they would have to spend money unless it was to educate the parent on the subjects. I don't think that any money should be spent. I think they're going to find the parents are going to want to be involved and encourage them. But to go out and have programs and spend money, I think it's a waste of money.
Let's move on to the next question, but I should mention for context purposes, that was a 2014 article in the Atlantic Monthly. So the next question, let's get to it, goes like this. Ray, 13 people are running for the Board of Education. 9 will be elected. Why should voters make you one of their choices for the Board of Education? What distinguishes you from the rest of the pack? What will your presence add to the group formed by the other 8 board members that will be elected? What do you say?
Good. I think they should vote for me because, A, I'm very familiar with the system. I went through it. My children went through it. My grandchildren went through it. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly over the past 25, 30 years. And it's mostly good. I'll say this. I think I bring an experience to the board where I'm involved with the students I have over 5,000 volunteer hours at Sheehan High School over the past 10 years. And I see a lot of things which are good. I see some problem areas which need addressing, which maybe a board member who isn't on the ground in the school doesn't get to see it. I hear from teachers from time to time, but mostly parents. Why are we doing this? Why not? And they feel that they can talk to me, and especially since I announced I've had an outpouring of parents. Gee, I'm glad you're running. We'd like to see you work on this. We don't like that. And I feel I can bring the experience of being there to the board. I'm retired, so I have a lot more time to devote to being there than maybe some other people. And I'm new. I don't have a lot of experience with the board, but I'm here to learn and to give my opinion, which I feel is valuable based on my experience on the ground.
Ray, could you give us one specific thing that you've noticed that you would like to change as a board member?
Well, yeah, deferred maintenance, for lack of a better word, and it's a couple things at Sheehan High School. One, when they first put the track in a number of years ago, the track was designed to last, I think, 18 years. They spent a lot of money on the track, but did not buy the machine that maintains the turf. By not using that machine, they lost 7 or 8 years of life on the turf before they bought it. And by the time they bought it, it was catch-up. Another thing I see, and I go to other schools with the sports teams, the condition of some of the bathrooms in our school system are really not good, mainly because a lot of the schools now use stainless steel walls, fixtures, doors and stuff, where we're still using the old fiber. And they paint it, it's got rot on it. And I would like to see, especially you go to like Sheehan or Lyman Hall, to a public event. The public sees these bathrooms and they judge our schools. This is what they see, and it's not a lot of money. So I think preventive maintenance is better than deferred maintenance, which is going to cost a lot more. That's just one example.
Let me get to the last one, and it reads this way. The typical talking point is that public schools always need to improve and always be more this, that, and the other, but those boring general platitudes aside, are you reasonably satisfied with the school district's track record and the general trajectory of the board's past policies and approaches, or do you believe that a specific adjustment in policy or tone is needed? If so, please be specific other than what you just mentioned. And the baked-in follow-up question, so if the new board is elected and you're on it, will everything be pretty much the same?
All right. I think it's generally in the right direction. I see some things I see a lack of instruction in American history. I think that's, from what I'm seeing, American history is no longer from 1620 on up. All of a sudden it's starting to be into the 1900s and in some place 1940s. And I'm upset about that. I really feel that we're losing something by not educating. And I think that's part of the problems with people, that they don't know the history behind statues, for instance, and they just know what's going on today. I would like to see better history. They don't teach Wallingford history at all. The only Wallingford history they get is from their parents, and the majority of parents are not born and brought up in Wallingford, so they don't have a history. And I would like to see that included. As far as anything else, one of the programs which I really, really like, it's given to sophomores, and it's a 4-day program. It's called Credit for Life. And it's the students picking a job that they're going to do. They get what their salary is, and then they spend a half a day, the sophomores, at the Parks and Rec, and they go through, they buy a house, they rent a house, they buy a car, they buy books, they go to college, they pay for college. At the end of the day, you see them going around, and all of a sudden they're going back. They're not going to pay as much for their cell phone. They realize that this is not a thing. That's one day, and it's when they're sophomores. I would like to see a Credit for Life offered as a half a semester in their senior year, which prepares these kids who are going to college for the real life. I just don't think they can balance a checkbook or know what to do or how to apply for credit. I think that's important.
Oh, didn't mean to cut you off. We have time for a short follow-up and a short answer, then we're going to run out of time.
Okay, Ray. How would you go about trying to build consensus? You know, you've got 8 other board members, and so how do you build support for that idea of expanding that program?
Well, I think it has to start at the ground level. The parents have to be in favor of it. I would like to see the board members look at this and look at the fact that they all love this program. There isn't a board member out there that doesn't think this is the greatest thing going. But I think it's got to be more. It's got to be a half a semester as part of another course. It's really important that they get the real life experience before they get into college and they're calling Mom up, I need more money, I overspent.
Let's make that the final
Right.
word. Yeah. Ray, thanks for coming on the show.
My
We
pleasure,
appreciate
enjoyed it.
Good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you.
Be right back with Tammy Raccio. Our next guest in the studio, candidate for the Board of Education, a Democrat, Tammy Raccio. Tammy, thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show.
Thanks for having me.
You were kind enough to send us some information about you. I just want to give some background,
Yeah.
a little bio information here, so folks get to know Tammy Raccio. She says, she emailed us that she has a Bachelor of Science in Accounting received from Quinnipiac University, got a Master's in Organizational Leadership for Public Service / Nonprofits from Quinnipiac. That's expected in 2018. Lifelong resident of Wallingford. She's a CPA in finance and works at Yale University since 2003. Some other credits on her resume, and we're not reading it all.
No.
We don't do that with anybody. It's just too much.
Right.
But she has served on subcommittees for the Wallingford Board of Education. For example, there was a 5-year strategic planning committee and a district wellness management team, among other things. Let's get down to business. Tammy, you heard that first question from the Atlantic. What did you think of that article?
So as a parent with 2 children in the Wallingford Public School System, I do think it's okay to help children with their homework. Having said that, the level of help each child needs is different. Some children don't need any help at all, and some other children may need more help. I do think, though, parent involvement is more than just helping with homework. One particular type of parent involvement is not necessarily better than another. Going to all the PTO meetings or going to all the PTAC meetings or doing homework. It's a combination of the family environment. And in many cases, the family environment is not 2 parents at home doing this with the children. It could be grandparents, it could be a guardian, it could be a whole kind of family network of support. So not necessarily every single night doing homework, not necessarily helping and having it come across as the parent's project, but really being involved with the students throughout their school career. And it's different at every level, elementary school, middle school, and high school. Even the risk survey that we do in high school to identify high-risk behaviors for students, one of the preventative measures to reduce high-risk behavior is family engagement. And it's really around that middle school time are the families making connections with the students, so that if something comes up when the students are in high school, when they may not want their parents around, and they definitely don't want their parents helping them with homework, is that connection there that they have an adult that they can reach out to. So I think that foundation between elementary school and middle school is very important, and that pays some of the dividends in the high school.
You know, Tammy, you mentioned certainly not every family is the same, and not every parent has the same opportunity for involvement.
Absolutely.
So how does is it the role of the Board of Education to try to find ways to make it possible for parents to be involved?
The Board of Ed has done, I think, a phenomenal job with opportunities for parents. And you're right, not every family is equipped. In many cases, there could even be families that have language barriers at home trying to help students. We have a phenomenal public library. We have tutors. We have different systems and different resources that have been put in place throughout the entire district that can support families when they identify that there's an actual need. So I think if there's a need out there identified, it's always met.
Let's get to the next question. Let's get to it. Tammy, the question is, 13 people are running for the Board of Education. 9 will be elected. Why should voters make you one of their choices for the Board of Education? What distinguishes you from the rest of the pack? What will your presence add to the group formed by the 8 board members that will be elected?
Thank you. As you know, there's 2 CPAs on the board now, neither of whom are running again. I am the only CPA running for the board. In addition to that, I have been in numerous years' worth of budget discussions and budget proposal processes, even sitting on the strategic plan helping to develop the different areas. The upcoming years for the budget for the Board of Ed are going to be tough years. There's going to be difficult decisions. I bring to the Board of Ed an amount of knowledge of what's involved with the budget, history, because I've been involved for many years, and then my finance background to actually help make some of the suggestions and make some of the decisions that are going to have to be made. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that it's going to be a rough few years.
Yeah, and good point. And you mentioned, though, you're familiar with the strategic plan. So keeping in mind that there's some challenging years ahead, is there a piece of that strategic plan or one item in that strategic plan that you really think you would advocate for?
I could pick out things from every element of the plan that I would advocate for. I think technology is huge, and I think that we've done a fabulous job of getting technology into the schools, and what we need to do now is really to help the teachers know how to use that so that it's not a burden to them, so that it makes life easier for them. Because in some cases, the students know more about the technology. I don't know about you, but sometimes if I have a problem with my phone, I go to my teenager.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to leverage some of what we have and maximize that information, because we've done a really good job. There's plenty of, and there's more coming with where we're going with technology and as far as a 1-to-1 ratio. But we've done a great job getting technology all the way down to the touch-its that are in the elementary schools. So now we need to provide the development for the teachers and the professional development so that they can maximize its use.
Third question.
Okay.
The typical talking point is that public schools always need to improve and be more of this, that, and the other. Those boring general platitudes aside, are you reasonably satisfied with the school district's track record and the general trajectory of the board's past policy and approaches? Or do you believe that a specific adjustment in policy or tone is needed? If so, please be specific. And after the board is elected, will everything be about the same if you're on that board?
Well, I think if we look at what the vision and the mission are of the board, and we look at the strategic items that are tied to that vision and mission, I'm comfortable with those strategic items. I think they've been measured well. I think we know where we stand with each one of them. There's been a short-term, long-term plan for those. What I would like to see, and I know that it's on Dr. Menzo's list and he's working on it, we've actually been able to obtain silos of excellence in the different areas of the strategic plan. We need to pull that together and come up with some type of a balanced scorecard that we can really rate where our successes were. And in doing that, we'll be able to identify where areas are in need of improvement or more focus. And I think that's one of the things that is on the agenda for Dr. Menzo to try and provide within the next year or so. But I think that's going to be very important, and it'll help give the entire board, no matter who's on it in the next term, a good direction of where to go or what to change.
We have time for a quick follow-up.
One of the most common complaints I think I hear about the school system, the previous candidate mentioned it, which is the notion that the school buildings aren't as nice as other towns. And I noticed that as a parent when I started going to other schools for sporting events. So I don't know, I don't want to start with a premise. What do you think about the shape of the buildings and what could be done?
The buildings are in need of attention. As an active parent and doing a lot of PTAC, I've read every one of the school climate survey comments. for the high school that my son goes to. And there's a lot of comments on the condition of bathrooms and conditions of the buildings and lighting in the parking lots. To the extent that the funding has been available, they've changed the light bulbs so that they're brighter. They've changed cleaning areas. I know the board would love to get in and gut bathrooms and do renovations. The capital expenditure piece of what the board gets actually flows through the mayor's office and through town council. That also ends up being a problem because there's only so much capacity we have to take on capital projects every single year. So they have to be prioritized.
Let's make that the final
Yeah.
word. Tammy Raccio, thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show. Good luck on the campaign trail.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back. So our thanks again to Ray Ross and Tammy Raccio for coming on the show. Elections are coming up. Municipal elections are coming up. We wanted to take a couple minutes to review the ballot, the prospective ballot that people are going to be looking at and using to vote on Election Day. And I made a little clip, a little slide of the ballot. I want to sort of walk through it with you, and this comes from the Record Journal.
Okay.
You know, I just scanned the sample ballot
Right,
that
we
you guys
had
in the paper.
Yeah.
So let's get that ballot one JPEG up, Bruce. And if you can get a little closer to your computer screen or TV screen, there's some things on the ballot that I wanted to highlight. And of course, everything that's in color, I did.
Right.
So I put in the red, I put in the green arrow, and I put in the blue underlining. And I put in the two red arrows because people may forget that on the ballot there's also a question on charter revision. And those red arrows point to the circles you fill in. Are you in favor of charter revision or are you not? On a previous show I said I'm voting in favor of it, but that's another topic for another day. As you go down to the main body of the ballot to where the green arrow points, where it says Town Council, the instructions on the ballot says you can vote for up to any 9. Bruce, let's take that off for a minute, and Ralph and I are going to confuse ourselves by trying to explain that, and then we're going to put that ballot back up after you and I talk a little bit. So vote for up to any 9. You can vote for 1 counselor,
Right.
2 counselors,
Right.
3, 4, 5, 6,
Absolutely.
7, 8, or all 9. And I guess there was some question about, do you have to vote for 9? Did you guys, at the Record Journal, run across this issue, or?
We did. In fact, we had a story on it, and I would say it is the most common question that I get asked about municipal elections, even at the polling place, which is, do I have to vote for 9? The fear that somehow a ballot won't be counted if you don't vote for 9.
Yeah. Well, let's beat that up one more time. You can vote for 1
Right.
or 9 or anything in between, and the same goes for the Board of Ed. The same rules apply. You can vote for 1 Board of Ed member, 2, 3, 4, or all the way up to 9. Let's get that ballot sample up again, Bruce, the ballot 1, because some people, no, I don't want to start it. I don't want to start it that way.
Right.
Let's make it clear that on the town council portion of this ballot, you could vote, and this is by way of example only, because this is how the ballot is laid out.
Right.
You could vote for everyone on that second column. You could vote for Jesse Reynolds and Joe Marone and John Sullivan. And you may think intuitively, well, no, wait a minute, they're you know, above each other or below each other. Don't I have to pick one of the 3? Don't I have to vote for Jesse Reynolds or Joe Marone or John Sullivan? No.
No.
You can vote for all 3.
Up to any 9.
Up to any 9, yeah.
Right.
So just to beat this example up, moving further to the right on column 3, for example, you could vote for both Bruce Conroy and Chris Shortell.
Of course.
And you could vote for Jesse Reynolds, Joe Marone, John Sullivan, Bruce Conroy, and Chris Shortell. That's 5. You could stop there or keep going. Have we beaten this up?
Well,
or
except
do you
that
think
I think what I try to tell people, and I'll
Yeah.
be checking it with you,
Yeah.
the number that you really, the crucial number here is 10. You don't want to circle 10. So people sometimes get hung up on numbers.
Yeah.
And I think that and I'm going to ask you if I'm getting it right. The issue becomes if you go over 9, that then there's a problem with the ballot.
Yeah, I don't know the exact process, but I
Yeah.
hope the voting machine spits it out, and
Right.
and then the registrars
Right.
have got to
So
look at it.
I think 10 is the
monitor.
number that really is important.
So we got a Board of Ed ballot too. Let's just look at that because the same principle applies. And again, this comes from the Record Journal, the sample ballot you guys put in the paper. So, for example, going to let's say column 16, you could vote for Nick D'Agostino and Lou Cherwinski. Or going back to the beginning, you could vote for Brian Rivard and Ray Ross. You don't have to vote for one or the other, even though one name is above or below the other. Up to any 9.
Right.
Got it?
I think we have
Let's move on.
covered
then.
it, right?
Yeah, let's move on. Maybe we'll address this again on another show.
All right.
So I want to put up another slide.
Mm-hmm.
It's a slide of a statue, and maybe it's called Statue 1, Bruce. Let's see what that looks like. Recognize that statue?
Oh, yes, that's from Wall Street.
That's from Wall Street.
Yeah, I like that, and I just can't remember the name of the statue, but that's...
Fearless Girl.
Yeah, God.
Fearless Girl.
Are there any other kind, Mike?
Man, I'm not touching that.
You're right, okay.
Ralph,
Yeah.
despite your baiting. We got another view of this. Bruce, let's go to the other side.
Oh, isn't that great?
So this is I don't know if it's still there, but I think Fearless Girl, that statue is still at Wall Street. And to me it says, and the good thing about statues is you can say different things to different people, there are different ways of looking at it. But this says, womanhood is saying to the men on Wall Street, you better not treat me unfairly because I ain't afraid of you. And she's looking right in this bull, this big, massive bull, which in days past represented Wall Street. And so now you have Fearless Girl just staring that bull down. So that statue is very meaningful for a lot of folks. And that's the segue into our controversy about statutes that's going on across the country. Let's take that one down, Bruce. But Fearless Girl was what I was going to use to help explain.
Great example. Well, great example because I think it evokes. It's a statue that really evokes thought and whatever you think about it, but it evokes interpretation. Yeah. It's a great one.
So there's this kerfluffle nationwide. It started over the summer. When there was some thinking that some of the statutes that commemorate especially Confederate generals, Confederate soldiers, and slightly more recently European conquistadors of Central Latin America, that maybe the time is up for some of those statutes and they ought to come down. This controversy provokes a lot of sharp reaction on each side. I took some clips, and there's some editorials from the Record Journal that I want you to weigh in on when we get past some basic stuff. But I wanted to read some stuff to sort of set the table and get a factual basis that we all are starting from. I'm going back to August 16 in the Record Journal. Rich Lowry wrote, now he's a national columnist and he's thought of as a conservative writer. And Rich Lowry wrote in part, the monuments should go, and he's talking about monuments to Confederate generals like Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson. He says the monuments should go. Some of them simply should be trashed. Others transmitted to museums, battlefields, and cemeteries. The heroism and losses of Confederate soldiers should be commemorated, but not in everyday public spaces where the monuments are flashpoints in poisonous racial contention and white nationalists often mustering in their defense. Moving on to another piece. This was in the New York Times. It's one of my favorites. I didn't, frankly, Ralph, I didn't send it to you, but it's not too long, but it's one of my favorites. And it's entitled When History's Losers Write the Story. About the third or fourth paragraph, it goes this way. In the United States, the Civil War remains the most divisive and unresolved experience Americans have ever had, according to David Blight, a historian at Yale. The Civil War is like a sleeping dragon. If you poke it hard enough, it will raise its head and breathe fire. Here it comes. That is in part because the loser was allowed its own interpretation. The South, facing catastrophic loss of life, and mass destruction on a European scale, wrote its own history of the war. It cast itself as an underdog, overwhelmed by the North's superior numbers, but whose cause, a noble fight for states' rights, was just. The North just looked the other way. Northern elites were more interested in reestablishing economic ties than in keeping their commitments to blacks' constitutional rights. The political will to complete Reconstruction died. It goes
Right.
on. There's other reading and research out there that many of the statutes dedicated to Confederate generals like Robert E. Lee were constructed during the Jim Crow era, 1910, 1920,
Excellent point.
and they were symbols of in the opinion of many, to racism. A couple more articles I'm going
Good.
to get to you.
Right.
All right. This is from the Hartford Courant, September 10, entitled U.S. Monuments to Spanish Conquerors Facing Criticism. Public statutes and tributes to early Spanish conquerors are facing mounting criticism tied to the brutal treatment of American Indians centuries ago by Spanish soldiers and missionaries, with activists drawing ethical parallels to the national controversy over Confederate monuments. Goes on from California to Florida and, all over the place. And now we get to the Record Journal stories and
Okay.
editorials I want to ask you about. September 19, an editorial, Columbus statute needs historical context. There was a story about the Columbus protest in
Right.
Southington, and others. What's going on there and the position of the Record Journal?
Well, what's going on is there's been a move afoot in Southington, mostly by private Italian-American groups, to put a monument, a bust of Columbus, in front of the municipal center to honor, their intent is to honor Italian-Americans. And of course, so that effort has started some time ago, finished up this year, and they received town council approval to put this monument in front of the municipal center. A group locally found out about the plan and decided to protest along the lines that Columbus's place in history and his actions have gotten a lot more attention, a lot more context. And what this group was advocating for, I think at first they would have preferred the removal of the monument from in front of the municipal center. But when they couldn't do that, they were at least asking for some kind of words on the statue that certainly gave Columbus credit where perhaps historically credit is due, but also pointed out some of the more controversial aspects of Columbus's legacy.
So who won?
Well,
Where did it end up?
Well, yeah, there was on Columbus Day,
Yep.
they dedicated the monument, and a pretty large group showed up and silently and peacefully protested. They had signs. They did not interrupt the ceremony.
No heckling.
Or at least no heckling.
No shouting
Now,
down.
they're holding signs.
Okay.
So certainly the Italian-American groups there, some of them complained that the signs marred the ceremony. But there was a turnout, and this was after the group did seek compromise in terms of some more historical context on the statue and was rejected. So there was a protest, and we're still getting letters about it. So it certainly touched a nerve, for lack of a better word, in town.
So where does the editorial page stand?
Well, I think the Record
And
Journal.
what's your opinion?
Okay, let me do the editorial page.
Sure.
The newspaper was fully in support of historical context on the statue. I mean, that was the issue before us. I think, in a larger sense, we prefer these monuments not in front of public buildings, but more in museums, or certainly if the Italian-American Club wants to put Columbus in front of them. The issue is that when you put it in front of a public building, a community is in essence sanctioning that monument, or a majority of the community, or that monument reflects. And without a complete portrayal of Columbus, all the people of Southington are not endorsing that monument. So that was our position. My position, and it's very individual, but as an Italian American, Columbus was never a symbol in our household, nor so I just disagree with Italian American groups latching on to Columbus. I know there's a history, and maybe there's a history perhaps that I need more educating on. I can only say my personal experience is not that Columbus was the Italian American that I looked up to. If I was going to honor Italian Americans, the thing that I'm very grateful for, and sometimes get a little emotional about, and I'll try not to, but I think of my Italian American ancestors who, you know, were in the southern part of Italy, like a lot of Italian Americans were, in the poorer part of Italy. They left basically because they couldn't find food. I mean, I'm not saying they were literal, but you don't leave if you have plenty to eat and you have a great situation. They left, and I always think about them getting on these boats, which were not certainly would be primitive, and going across the ocean and coming to a land where they didn't know the language in many cases, and so I'm very grateful. So to me, like Girl Fighting,
Fearless Girl,
I would love to see like Fearless Immigrant.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's a boat, or it's an immigrant, or, you know, somehow showing that they came here with nothing, and it took a lot of courage to come.
So people say, well, okay, where does it end? You want to take the statue of George Washington down and Abraham Lincoln down, and so it's the slippery slope argument. And Donald Trump, famously, I think at a campaign-style rally, made that pitch. And so he said, well, they're destroying history, they're rewriting history. When does it end? They're going to want to take down the statues of George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, I think. How do you answer that?
Well, it's a complex question, so I don't want to dodge it. And just like
I won't let you. I'll give you my.
You've given people some places to go, and I will say that C-SPAN, if you have a chance to go to the website, did like an entire day on the complexities of the statue debate. But I will just kind of sum it up. And you asked, where does it stop? Well, first of all, no one is saying you can't have statues. What we're saying is you may not be able to have them in front of public buildings if, number one, you're not accurate in the story that you're telling. If you're saying Columbus only did good, Columbus didn't kill natives, that's not fair, any more than it's fair to glorify Robert E. Lee completely. I mean, there were hundreds of thousands of Union soldiers that died in that war, and some people consider Robert E. Lee a traitor. You know, so alls I think people
he was a traitor.
And he was
a traitor. It's not a matter of opinion.
Right, okay, right. He was a traitor. Thank you, Mike. He was a traitor, but you could also
plain and simple. And a racist.
But just to show you, I think that I'm fairly open-minded. Yes, he was a traitor and a racist.
Yeah.
In some people's mind, from a military perspective, he was also a great general. And I'm not going to, but I certainly people could make an argument for that, and that might be fair in historical context.
Yeah.
So I don't think people are asking that these statues not exist. I think they're just asking for history to be recorded accurately.
Yeah, there have been various solutions to this. Some work and don't work. I shouldn't use solution. Approaches is much better than solution. South Africa had the same issue with apartheid. There were some statutes erected during apartheid that glorified white supremacy in South Africa. South Africa, I think, had a lot of study, a lot of introspection, and they made some decisions on a case-by-case basis that those South Africans who achieved great things before apartheid, even though they may have bought into or led up to the apartheid regime, if they predated apartheid and they accomplished great things for the country, their statutes were going to generally stay. But those that were powerful only because of white supremacy in South Africa, those were going to go. That's just South Africa. But a lot of people have argued, a lot of people, you know, they're smarter than me, they've written it up. It's not a slippery slope. It's a case-by-case determination. Who are the great Americans that the current generation want to admire, and the people that admired Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and the racists and white supremacists of the South, well, they had the right to put their statutes up because they admired Jim Crow. Jim Crow. But now times have moved on, and other people want to see history more complete. And also, they say, we don't admire those people anymore. Let's keep the statutes of people that we admire, like Abraham Lincoln, like George Washington. But with the benefit of history and broader perspective, we don't admire those people as much, and we don't think those statues should be erected so that current generations look at Robert E. Lee and say, he was a great American. Why wouldn't he be? There's a statue of him. No, he wasn't. He was a traitor and a racist, and we don't admire him anymore. So that's where a line can be drawn on that. What have we missed?
Well, no, but you talked about different approaches, and I just want
Yeah.
to chime in quickly.
Yeah.
Among the things is I learned when I started looking into this a little bit more, not because of Charlottesville, actually pre-Charlottesville.
Yeah.
Because it was in the news. It wasn't getting the attention, but it's been in the news steadily, probably for the past 4 or 5 years, certainly, was that somewhere in the South, there is the American Museum of the Confederacy, or the Museum of the Confederacy, and I was fascinated to find out that they hired an African-American woman to head that museum. And one of the reasons they did that was because they were looking for new approaches to the Museum of the Confederacy, that they were kind of acknowledging that they needed to change the way they taught the history of the Confederacy.
Yeah, right.
And they needed the perspective of an African-American woman, and also her out front on this, to change some ideas. Because you can imagine the Museum of the Confederacy, to some people, would not be an attractive place at all. And so that's the example of new.
I just want to bottom up
Yeah.
my comments, and I'm going to move on. So people are saying by taking down a statue of Robert E. Lee, you're erasing history, and the answer is no.
No.
We're actually remembering history.
No.
We're remembering it better and with more detail, and with less bias. So taking the statue down is remembering history and not erasing history, in my humble opinion. Let's talk quickly about the NFL.
Sure.
National Football League. We had a big shtick about this last week. But there's a little follow-up that I ran across, and it cleared something up for me, and it had to do with the tax breaks that the NFL allegedly was getting. I think it was the president who threatened to take away their tax breaks, and this confused a lot of people.
Right.
So here's just a paragraph. It comes from the Hartford Courant, October 15. It says, as with most of the president's two-thumbed policy directives, sussing out the exact meaning is tough when he said we're going to take away their tax breaks. The NFL voluntarily gave up its tax-exempt status 2 years ago.
Wow.
It voluntarily gave up its tax-exempt status 2 years ago to keep its internal financials a secret. More likely, Trump could have been referring, or was referring, to the use of tax-exempt government bonds to help finance NFL stadiums, something other anthem-loving GOP elected officials have been calling attention to of late. So that's that part of it. To be continued.
Right.
We got a couple minutes left, and
We sure do.
over the summer, this was a development that appeared in August. The controversy concerning the Wooding-Kaplan property. We don't know where that is.
Right.
You wouldn't be watching this show if you're confused about that.
No.
The destiny and fate and future of the Wooding-Kaplan property was decided very quietly and administratively. The mayor had in his budget that was passed this past May sort of an obscure line that called for taking down that old Wooding building and making space for a new structure that would house like a garage and the sign shop, the police sign shop. And in addition, the plan, which was approved over the summer by the Planning and Zoning Commission, called for additional temporary parking on the public side of the fence in the Wooding-Kaplan area.
Right.
It'd be, adding more parking to where the temporary parking is now. And I read that and I said, wow, that's it. I mean, once parking is there, it's never going to be taken away.
Right.
Temporary becomes permanent. Some people have spoken out and said, you should have had the courage of your conviction. Instead of making it temporary, just go whole hog and make
Right.
it permanent and admit that's what you're doing and make it nice. But it's more politically expedient to sort of take little baby steps, call it temporary, and that way anyone could say, oh, it's just temporary.
Right.
All our options are open on the Wood and Kaplan. You want to sell it or build or whatever you want to do, and technically that is still correct, but I think it's over. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm just glad it's over. I mean, it's at least...
You're tired of it.
Well, it's one of the few things that, like, I covered the purchase of the Wood and Kaplan
boy.
property.
Yeah.
So that puts it in perspective. That's how long it's taken to straighten it out.
Yeah. All right, we're going to call an end to that controversy. If someone brings it up and we say it's over, it's
Yeah.
parking. It was decided in the summer of 2017. It is over. Another quick one, and frankly, I don't think I had a chance to talk to you
That's
about
all right.
it.
That's
but
good.
This is remember this collaboration group that we talked about last spring? It was this meeting, this group
Yes.
of citizens that
Yeah,
would lobby
this
the
downtown
mayor,
group.
the downtown group. Well, there was a piece on October 10. Written by Matt Zabrik about grassroots group focuses on parking, and I think it was a bit of a puff piece in that this grassroots group accomplished this signage or something
Right.
in the downtown, and I read it, and I said, wow, this is not a puff piece at all. Here's what I mean.
Right.
In 2004, the article starts, we had this parking study. In 2004,
I know.
this is 2017. In 2004, Linda Bush, identified some issues. 13 years later, the Wallingford government has not addressed it or solved it. It took a private group of private citizens to privately lobby the mayor to privately solve something that was pointed out by government in 2004. And I say, this is an article about how dysfunctional Wallingford government can be. Here's the evidence. Your thoughts?
Well, just my thought along
Yeah.
the same line as you is that the mayor, all these department heads that this group had to go to, the mayor, that report to the mayor.
Yeah.
So we could have cut this all out.
Oh, in 2005.
Right. The mayor could have just picked up the phone and said,
Do it.
Do this.
Yeah.
So I wondered, like, does he have a trouble, dealing with department heads? I don't know, or department heads, I have no
No,
idea. I don't want to guess. I guess dysfunction's the right word.
Well, he just didn't want to do it.
Okay.
He just didn't want to do it. Probably didn't recognize the need to do
Okay.
it. But the evidence to do it was there. I guess it took him 13 years to cozy up to the idea, and some people talking behind closed doors as to the need. But he's downtown every day. That's what struck me, and there had to be actually private monies devoted to this.
Right.
If you read the article, they
Right.
had to have a little
They had to get-
fundraiser or
right,
something
they
like
had
that.
sponsorship. Yeah. It's
Under
just-
normal circumstances, this would be a campaign issue
Yes. Yes.
about how
Both of them would be, right?
problems don't get
Right.
addressed.
Right. Both of them would be.
Should we make that the final word?
Sure.
Let's do that. You're off next week?
I'm off next week, Mike.
Okay. So we're going to continue on with our series of reporting a little more heavily now on the campaign.
Right.
We expect to have a couple of town council candidates on, and then on November 1, right before the election, we're going to get a little more deeply, into some of the
Yes.
political issues, and we're going to have a good time right up
Good.
to the run-up, election day. Let's call it quits. Thanks for tuning in to the Citizen Mike Show. We appreciate it. We're here on Wednesdays, but you can see the Citizen Mike Show on WPAA.tv Thursdays and Fridays and Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays at 9 o'clock. And in a couple of days after the show is produced, it's up on YouTube. Go to the YouTube homepage, the Citizen Mike Wallingford channel. After that, you got to click the right buttons, and you can see all the Citizen Mike shows you might want to see.
Right.
Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. Have a good night.